In the previous chapter, she fled from her abusive ex and ended up in a mansion in the arms of the country's most coveted millionaire. But it was inside the mansion that the real threat began. A cruel setup, a treacherous housekeeper, and a plan to destroy her. But the truth came to light, and Aisha, without warning anyone, left for far away. And now, will this love survive this? Love, lies, and danger. This story is just beginning. Watch part 2 of this story now and prepare for the unexpected. But before we start, comment below if you've already seen chapter 1. The market buzzed with voices, smells, and colors, but at that moment, everything dissolved around her. Vendors shouted prices, children ran with stolen fruit, old radios played distant music, but none of it seemed real. Amid all the distractions, two worlds collided in the most absolute silence. Aisha's hands were still damp from washing mangoes, her bare feet on the hot, dusty ground, her heart trapped in a place she no longer knew how to name. The bouquet of flowers in her trembling hands betrayed the urgency of someone who had crossed cities, bridges, and sorrows to be there. And there he was. Dio approached with short steps, as if afraid a sudden move might shatter the moment. Sweat dripped from his temples, his jacket wrinkled from the long, hurried journey. His face bore the marks of exhaustion, but his eyes, oh, those eyes, they carried relief, guilt, hope, and fear, all at once. His choked voice escaped in a whisper. Aisha, she hesitated. The name echoed like a memory from a past life she had buried. Her head lowered slowly, as if trying to hide the whirlwind of emotions threatening to spill over. The makeshift fruit canoe behind her seemed a fragile shelter against the storm his gaze provoked. Is it really you? Dio tried to smile, but it was a bitter, stifled smile, weighed down by absence. Where have you been? I searched everywhere. His breathless tone betrayed him, as if he had run his whole life to reach that spot. Aisha lifted her face, and for the first time in a long while, their eyes truly met. They weren't the same anymore. Hers bore scars and strength, his, regret and admiration. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes scanned the crowd, perhaps seeking an escape, perhaps an excuse. What are you doing here? Her voice came out firmer than she expected. It was a question, but also a warning. A shield, because the wound still bled inside. Dio stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I came because I had to see you, because I couldn't stand not knowing where you were anymore, because the truth finally came out. Aisha took half a step back. Her body shrank instinctively, as if still trying to protect itself from everything that had once brought her down. Her hands, still dirty from the market, clutched the hem of her simple skirt, as if trying to remember who she was now. The new version of herself, the woman who had survived. And why now, after everything? After what happened, after what you let happen? Each word was an arrow piercing the certainties he had tried to avoid. His silence during the imprisonment, the humiliation, the chaos. His silence had hurt more than any accusation, and she knew it. Dio tried to respond, but stopped. His gaze traced her face, as if seeking permission to speak. Because I was a coward, because I believed the wrong people, because deep down, I was afraid you might really be everything they said, and I hate myself for it. Aisha bit her lip, her eyes welling up but still firm. So you came all this way to ask for forgiveness? The question hung in the air, suspended between two destinies. Dio took a deep breath and replied, looking into her eyes, No, I came because I can't keep living without trying to fix what I broke, and because, even after everything, I still believe in you. I still believe in us. She blinked slowly, as if time needed recalibrating to process those words. Vendors around them kept shouting prices, cars honked, the world spun normally. But on that patch of hot, worn ground, there was a pause in destiny, a moment that seemed unwilling to end. Aisha didn't respond right away. She just observed. The way he was sweaty, disheveled, his face thinner than before. He wasn't just the rich man she had known. He was a man with scars. Scars that perhaps weren't so different from hers. Do you think a true love can survive so much pain and distrust? Dio insisted they could talk alone. Aisha's feet still trembled when, after long seconds of silence, she murmured an almost inaudible, okay. She couldn't look at him for more than 2 seconds without a knot forming in her stomach. Still, she accepted the invitation, not for him, but for the urgency that had weighed on her chest for months. They sat on a makeshift concrete bench, half hidden among banana stalls and tangerine crates. The heat was suffocating, the scent of ripe fruit mingling with sweat and the tension hanging in the air. For a few seconds, only the market's noise filled the space between them. Distant laughter, vendors shouting deals, pots clanging in the background of some house. Dio, still clutching the crumpled bouquet, struggled to find the right words. But it was Aisha who broke the silence. The words came unbidden, as if something inside had been ready to burst for a long time. Do you know what it's like to be handcuffed in front of everyone? After thinking you'd found peace, her voice was low but carried the resolve of someone with nothing left to lose. He tried to say something, but she raised a hand, asking for space. I was called a thief, a con artist. I slept in a cell without windows. And the worst wasn't what they said. It was your silence. You knew me, Dio. You knew who I was. And yet, you hid. He lowered his eyes. The once confident face now bore the marks of sleepless nights. His suit was wrinkled, the collar open, the tie absent. There was something raw in his appearance, as if time had been cruel to him too. When he tried to explain, his voice broke. I tried. I swear I did, but everything fell apart so fast. The press, my father, the will. I didn't know what to do. I was a coward. Aisha nodded, staring at the ground. It was hard to hear, but even harder to admit she missed him, that the nights without him had been cold, even under heavy blankets, that the silence of the village hurt more than any shout. Since you left, he began, swallowing hard, nothing has had color anymore. I look at the house and it all feels empty. The food has no taste. The sun doesn't shine the same. I searched for you everywhere, Aisha, not out of guilt, but because since that day I haven't been the same. He reached out carefully, touching her hand with gentleness. A small gesture, but heavy with meaning. For a moment, she didn't pull away. The touch warmed her palm, rekindling an old feeling that had never truly died. I know I can't erase what happened, but let me try to write a different ending with you. Before she could respond, an unusual commotion began around them. First, raised cell phones, then flashes. In seconds, a small crowd formed around the bench, journalists with outstretched microphones, photographers climbing crates. The scene seemed straight out of a soap opera, the Williams heir, in the middle of a popular market, beside the woman labeled a fugitive months ago. Is it her? One reporter shouted. The woman from the scandal. Are you confirming the involvement? Dio, look here, another snapped, shoving a microphone between them. Aisha's eyes widened, her body freezing. An old fear gripped her chest again, her shoulders hunched, bracing for another attack. But this time there was no escape. Dio stood up impulsively, his breath uneven, his eyes blazing. Enough! His voice echoed louder than the camera clicks. He gripped Aisha's hand firmly, without hesitation. Come with me, now! She tried to resist, glancing around, startled by the curious faces, but his tone left no room for argument. It wasn't a command, it was urgency, a silent plea from someone who, for the first time, was willing to fight for her. Not just in silence or in thought, but in front of the entire world. They crossed the market under shocked gazes. Fruit fell, voices overlapped, children stopped running. He opened the door of his gleaming black car and gently ushered her inside. One last camera click captured the moment before the vehicle disappeared down the dirt road, leaving dust, rumors, and a pile of unanswered questions. Inside the car, they breathed heavily. The silence was different now, more intimate, laden with everything still needing to be said, but also with everything already being felt. Dio gripped the steering wheel, but glanced at her for a moment. She was still there, beside him. It was still possible to start over, if she allowed it. If you also believe every love deserves a second chance, leave your like now. It shows you're rooting for this new beginning. The dirt road opened up between tall trees, their canopies forming natural arches where the late afternoon light danced in golden beams. Aisha, leaning against the car window, watched in silence. She had no idea where they were going, but there was something in that path and in Dio's presence that began to slowly dissolve the fear still lingering in her chest. The tension that consumed her at the market now gave way to curiosity, doubt, and the feeling she had long tried to hide from herself. When the car finally stopped, her eyes widened involuntarily. The vegetation was dense but welcoming. Amid the damp green, the sound of running water, steady like a distant whisper, could be heard. A small stone path led to a clearing where sunlight filtered through leaves, casting reflections on a crystalline spring that flowed into a waterfall. The air was fresh, the silence enveloping, and the beauty of the place seemed plucked from an ancient dream. "I've come here since I was a child," Dio said, noticing the enchantment in her gaze. "When the world weighs me down, it's the only place where I can truly breathe." Aisha hesitated. Her feet, still on the gravel, seemed unsure whether to move forward. Recent memories pulled her back, but Dio extended his hand, and something in the gesture, simple, patient, firm, made her take the first step. They walked, together through wet leaves and wildflowers. The slippery ground in some spots made them laugh softly, as if they were accomplices in a private escape. They approached the waterfall. The sound was louder now, but not enough to drown out Dio's voice as he stopped just ahead, locking eyes with her, his expression a mix of vulnerability and resolve. "You changed everything, Aisha. Since that day I opened the back door and saw you collapsed there. I've never been the same. You know, the parties, the contracts, the spotlight. None of it makes sense without peace. And I only found peace in your eyes." The words fell with the weight of a confession. Aisha remained silent, her eyes fixed on the face of this man who seemed so different from the millionaire she'd seen in the papers. The Dio standing there seemed stripped of vanity, arrogance, or any mask. "I tried everything to talk to you in that prison, but I couldn't. My father, the media, they were pressuring me, but nothing made me. Forget you. Please, at least let me try, let me be part of your new beginning." Their hands met with tenderness. He leaned in slowly, his eyes seeking permission in hers. There was no resistance. The kiss happened with the naturalness of something that had always existed, merely dormant. It was long, intense, but unhurried, as if each second was needed to heal everything that had been torn apart inside. When their lips parted, their faces still close, he whispered, "Stay with me, not because of what happened, but for everything that still can be." Aisha's silence wasn't rejection, it was emotion. With teary eyes, she nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, she felt safe in that feeling. Dio took her to a luxurious hotel away from the city. The contrast between the white sheets, the glass windows with a mountain view, and the simplicity of her soul was too stark to go unnoticed. Yet she didn't feel out of place. That night, there were no titles, no status, no pasts or wounds. There was only a man and a woman stripped of fear, surrendered to each other. It was tender, it was sincere. There was no urgency, only truth. As they slept, lulled by the rain that began to fall in the early morning, the world outside was ablaze. At the Williams mansion, the atmosphere was different. Alhaji Williams, Dio's father, watched the news with a furrowed brow and a tense jaw. The report showed his son's car leaving the village, accompanied by the same woman who, months ago, had tarnished the family name. Fury rose like lava. That woman was a mistake he refused to see, repeated. "This is a disgrace, an affront to our blood." His voice echoed through the empty corridors. The threat hung in the air, and he wasn't the only one disturbed. On the other side of the city, Kunle, Aisha's ex-partner, clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. The newspaper fell to the floor, but the headline was etched in his memory. "Millionaire spotted fleeing with mysterious. Woman at popular market." It couldn't be. The woman who had always been beneath his feet was now riding in an imported car with one of the country's most influential men. The humiliation of seeing her smile beside someone like Dio inflamed his wounded ego. And for someone like Kunle, a bruised pride was reason enough to resume the hunt. Meanwhile, at the hotel, the sun rose through the curtains. Aisha awoke to the soft sound of water from the shower. She rose slowly, wrapped in the sheet, walked to the window and for a moment allowed herself to smile. But what neither of them knew was that the past was still watching and had no intention of leaving them in peace anytime soon. There are stories that begin with pain, but only end with redemption. If you also want to see how far this love can go, subscribe to the channel now and follow each new chapter before anyone else, because the past hasn't said its final word. Dio and Aisha lived days of lightness and complicity. That seemed impossible months ago. They planned trips, exchanged promises between smiles, and every gesture felt like sealing a future they both feared to fully believe in. Returning to Mama Ayo's mansion was more than symbolic. When Aisha crossed the main door, The wrinkled hands of the elderly woman cradled her face with tenderness, as if reuniting with a daughter life had stolen from her for a time. They embraced with an intimacy that transcended blood, as if one's pain had silently healed. The others. As days passed, the mansion's garden bloomed again, now filled with laughter, lunches under the mango tree shade, and the constant scent of hibiscus that Aisha insisted on watering. Everything seemed to fall into place, almost everything, because on the other side of the city, a man gnawed at his rage like a caged animal. Alhaji Williams, accustomed to controlling inheritances, reputations, and sons, watched in silence what he deemed the destruction of his legacy. To the old patriarch, Aisha was nothing more than a persistent mistake, a woman without a surname, without wealth, with a police record, however unjust, was a stain that even his son's love couldn't wash away. And when opinions weren't enough, he decided to act. On a muggy morning, he met an old acquaintance, Aisha's ex-fiancé. Kunle was even darker than before. The frustration of losing control over the woman he thought he owned grew like a tumor. He accepted the proposal without hesitation. The money offered by Alhaji was substantial, but what truly motivated him was revenge. He wanted to see Aisha back in his hands, begging, crying, as in the old days of terror. Only this time, she wouldn't escape. He began watching her from afar. Every morning he parked an unmarked car near the mansion's surroundings. With binoculars in hand, he observed their daily routine with dry eyes and clenched fists. Seeing them together, smiling through the corridors of a world that didn't belong to him, ignited a contained fury bordering on madness. One afternoon, as Aisha picked flowers with Mama Ayo, Kunle gripped the gun hidden in his car's console. His eyes bulged when he saw Dio descend the wooden stairs, smiling, pulling Aisha by the waist with ease. That image ate at him, making him feel as if every shred of his masculinity had been stripped away. Alhaji, however, didn't want blood. He wanted silence. He asked Kunle only to take her far away, preferably out of the country, something to erase the young woman's presence from the Williams family story once and for all. But he underestimated the nature of the man he hired. Kunle didn't just want to remove Aisha from Dio's life, he wanted to destroy her. The mansion's routine remained serene on the surface. Dio prepared a marriage proposal. Mama Ayo hand-stitched a silk scarf for the young woman. Aisha, even amid smiles, occasionally felt a shiver down her spine, as if something lurked in the shadows. An intuition she'd had since childhood, now seeming to warn that Paradise's days were numbered. Kunle knew every schedule, every path, every moment Aisha was alone. He watched from behind trees, pretending to be a passerby in plazas, and once even broke into the garage at night to study the security guard's routine. Nothing escaped his plan. What he didn't expect was that Dio, despite being enchanted, remained vigilant. Something in Aisha's eyes still seemed afraid, and it was that fear he wanted to unravel. But before he could piece it together, the gears would start turning. The sky was clear that late afternoon in Lagos, as if the city had decided to shine for Aisha and Dio's engagement. Flowers were already being arranged in the mansion's gardens. Mama Ayo gave smiling instructions from the veranda, and the private driver adjusted the rearview mirror of the black car parked at the main entrance. Aisha, seated in the back, delicately smoothed the light fabric of her dress, a simple yet charming design that highlighted her natural beauty. Her curly hair was loosely tied, with a few strands falling over her face. Her eyes sparkled, even beneath the slight tension of someone who had lived too much to easily believe in happiness. The driver had stepped out for a moment to retrieve something Aisha had forgotten. She waited calmly, gazing at the garden where she had laughed so much in recent days. A corner of hope had blossomed there, where only fear had once resided. But hope wasn't fast enough. The door handle moved. The car door swung open with force, and there was Kunle. His police uniform had been replaced by a dirty shirt, but his gaze carried the same threat as before, perhaps more. Her face paled, her hands trembled, reaching for the lock, but he was quicker. He leaped into the driver's seat and locked everything with a sharp click. The car sped off before she could scream for help. Aisha tried to open the windows, kicked the seat, struck his shoulder, shouted his name like a plea. Kunle only smirked faintly, a smile that blended possession and madness. "Did the princess really think she could be free of me?" he said with a cold voice. "You were wrong, and you'll pay for it." Every turn he made seemed to distance her from the world. The car sliced through narrow streets, entering increasingly deserted zones while her despair grew. She begged for mercy, said she just wanted peace, that she was engaged, that everything had changed. But the words bounced back. Kunle's sweaty, tense face made it clear this wasn't about love, it was about control. At the Williams mansion, the driver returned with the forgotten item in hand, only to notice the car's absence. He looked around, confused. He asked a security guard, ran through the garden, and finally called Dio. The description of the man who entered the car was enough to sound the alarm. Dio's legs buckled for a second. The bouquet he held for Aisha fell onto the living room carpet. The realization hit too. Quickly. Kunle. It had to be him. The same man who had haunted her past. The same name she whispered in nightmares while sleeping in his arms. Without thinking, Dio ran to the office. He called the police, reported everything he knew, and began messaging influential contacts. The minutes dragged like hours. He sweated coldly, pacing back and forth, phone in hand, voice faltering. If something happens to her, if something happens, he repeated, like a mantra. On the other side of the city, Aisha cried silently in the back seat. The fear was so intense her body felt numb. She tried to memorize the routes, the poles, the sounds, but the speed was high and the streets all looked the same. At some point she realized they were leaving Lagos. Dio called his father for help, but the old man didn't answer. He knew exactly what it was about. You made your choice. Now deal with the consequences, he said, as he ignored the ringing phone. That was more than a refusal. It sounded like a warning, as if Old Man Williams knew more than he let on. Dio's heart pounded in his throat, and for the first time, he felt anger toward the blood running in his veins. At the central police station, the case was logged as a kidnapping with aggravating circumstances. A patrol car was dispatched to follow the usual route to the village where Aisha had lived, but it all seemed futile. It was like searching for a needle in an entire field of hay. Still, Dio went with the officers. He preferred to search until the last second, rather than sit in a room listening to the echo of his own helplessness. The car sped like a wild beast, tearing through the asphalt with burning tires. Aisha trembled in the passenger seat. The seatbelt tightened against her chest, but nothing gripped tighter than the fear growing with each sharp turn. Kunle's sweaty face reflected the fury of a man no longer reasoning. Wide eyes, clenched jaw, fingers pressing the steering wheel as if it were part of his own body. "Did you really think you could leave me for that rich guy?" He bellowed with hatred, teeth gritted. "I warned you that you were mine. Only mine." Aisha's screams no longer carried force. They were hoarse, muffled by panic. She stretched her arms, tried to reach the door lock, begged for mercy, but the response was always the same. More speed. The bridge approached, wind slicing through the cracks like a razor. The city faded behind, and the nightmare seemed to reach its peak. On the other side of the road, police cars appeared with blaring sirens. The chase had finally begun. Two police vehicles closed in at high speed, narrowing the gap. Inside one car, the police radio crackled. "Black vehicle, suspect in kidnapping, heading toward Makoko Bridge. Proceed with caution, possible hostage on board." Seeing the lights reflect in the rearview mirror, Kunle accelerated even more. Aisha closed her eyes for a second. She felt the world spin inside her. Then, instinct screamed, louder than fear. With a swift, unexpected move even to herself, she thrust her arm against the steering wheel. The car swerved abruptly. The impact was immediate. The vehicle crashed into the bridge's guardrail, shattering part of the barrier, and plunged downward. Everything happened in seconds. Outside, the patrol cars braked sharply. One officer nearly fell as he ran to the edge. The water below swallowed the car as if starving. The sound of metal ripping through the river's surface echoed in the chests of those watching. Dio, arriving moments later, ran like a madman. His jacket flapped open, his red eyes, her name escaping in desperate shouts. "Aisha! Aisha!" An officer tried to hold him back, but he broke free violently. He knelt at the bridge's edge, looked at the river, and shouted again, heedless of his surroundings. She can't. But what no one expected happened. A movement on the surface, bubbles, then a hand. Aisha emerged unsteadily, hair plastered to her, face clothes torn by the current. She swam with difficulty, her body weak, her soul in tatters. The water seemed to pull her back, but some invisible force, perhaps the will to live, perhaps a promise never made, pushed her forward. On the other side, rescuers jumped into the water. One reached her, gripped her firmly. and with the help of buoys and ropes, managed to bring her to the shore. Her body trembled, her teeth chattered, but her eyes were alive, frightened, but alive. Dio ran to her, kneeling before the woman he thought he'd lost, and enveloped her in his arms. "You came back to me. You're alive. Thank God." She didn't respond immediately. She just cried, her face pressed against his shoulder, her sobs muffled between the beats of the man who never forgot her. Rescuers arrived. A stretcher was set up. Paramedics took over. As she was carried away, Aisha turned her face and sought Dio with her eyes. "You came," she murmured before exhaustion closed her eyes. Kunle was pulled from the car shortly after. The impact was fatal. Police confirmed his death on the spot with no chance of resuscitation. The silence around weighed heavy. No one celebrated. Even a monster left trails of pain. They didn't imagine it wasn't over yet. Could this love really withstand what's still to come? Or will the secrets of the past once again drive Aisha and Dio apart? The news of the bridge tragedy still echoed in the papers, but the detective in charge, experienced and attentive to details, noticed a piece out of place. Kunle's movements before the kidnapping had been funded by someone with resources and connections. Tracing the bank transfers revealed deposits from a company linked to the Williams conglomerate. When Alhaji Williams' name surfaced in the records, everything became clearer. The old magnate was summoned to testify. At the police station, Dio's father arrived, escorted by 2 lawyers dressed in a dark suit and calculated expressions. The officer received him with firmness. He denied everything, claimed it was a coincidence that his company handled hundreds of transactions daily, that he would never condone a crime. But his tone, the pauses, the way he avoided the detective's gaze, all betrayed that there was more behind that facade of arrogance and control. Outside, Dio waited, hands in his pockets, his gaze lost. He had read the report before his father was called. He knew that pattern of manipulation. He had grown up surrounded by veiled promises and threats disguised as advice. He knew the man who raised him was capable of anything to protect the empire, even sabotaging the only woman who made his son feel truly alive. 2 days later, the sun seemed kinder, the hospital garden filled with soft perfumes. Aisha, still pale, left her bed wearing a simple dress that enhanced her natural beauty. Her radiant dark skin glowed under the clear sky, her long curls gently tied back. She walked slowly, leaning on Dio's arm, who smiled with a tenderness rare to see in a man so strong. They were together against all odds. At the door, journalists tried to approach, but Dio ignored them, heading straight to the car. Before they left, in a surprising move, Alhaji appeared. He wore a light traditional Nigerian outfit holding a discreet bouquet. With an expression mixing exhaustion and theatricality, he approached them and said, "Aisha, I was a fool. I was blinded by pride. Forgive this old man." Aisha hesitated. She didn't trust that gaze, not after everything she knew. But she looked at Dio, saw the hope in his eyes, and decided to accept the gesture. She responded with a restrained nod, without elaborating. The father then gave them a light hug and bid farewell, with a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. What Aisha and Dio didn't know was that same afternoon, behind the door of his vast office, Alhaji Williams slammed his fist on the desk. They think they've won. They really believe love conquers all? I still run this show. Now that the mad dog is gone, I need a new hound, someone who'll finish the job properly. While the two celebrated in silence their survival and the new step toward the future, the long-awaited engagement, a new plan was being woven in the shadows, and the true test of that love was about to begin. What will happen when Alhaji's new plan begins? If you want the continuation, comment, "I want it."